Thank you. So let's talk about your poem, Anxiety, a Ghost Story.
Let's do it.
Um, so how did that poem kind of come about?
Yeah. So my writing process is not at all organized or systematic. Normally, I'll just get like a line or an idea in my head and write it down in a notebook or the notes app on my phone or whatever, and just kind of let it live there until something makes me think of it again, and then I just have the energy to work through it. So I had been wanting to use a haunted house analogy and kind of like mess with that for a few months, but I just had it, in a notebook that said like haunted house analogy question mark, and just sat there. And then I it was August, gosh, I don't even remember, 2015 maybe,
Mm-hmm.
which was when I was going to the Nationals in Oakland. And so I knew that I wanted to perform a new poem. And I thought, okay, well, now I actually really have to work on this. And so I started sort of slowly fleshing it out. And really, it was just like a line here or an image there. It was definitely not top to bottom. And then I didn't put the poem together as performed until I think the day before. The day before that video was recorded. That was the first time I ever performed it.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a last minute push.
Wow. Okay. Oh, and was that line when you go the Miles Davis line and you kind of did you forget your line or
Oh
did
yeah, I forgot. Definitely forgot it. And so I actually thought that poem was not going to ever get posted, because as
yeah.
soon as I sat down, I was like, well, drop the line, so they're not going to put it up. But I think they kind of thought, well, it's not entirely clear if you forgot the
Yeah.
line, and so yeah,
That's
it
what I love about that one. That made that video so much better because like that was the first video I saw of you and I was like, who is this person? I have to know this person.
well, it's very comforting, because I felt pretty bad about it, and I honestly, like, so much of my story with poetry is just like sort of a right place, right time type thing. But I honestly think that it was just that it was October. I think they posted on Halloween. And so they wanted something sort of like spooky. And they're like, well, we have this poem where this girl dropped the line, but I guess we'll post it. And then it's really resonated with a lot of folks. So I think, timing was on my side on that one.
Um, so let's talk about like I guess on some aspect I want them to kind of watch this video and kind of understand tropes and the usage of it. So can you
Sure.
kind of so you said you jotted down like okay you wanted to do the haunted house. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah.
Because you made references of like goosebumps. There's a lot of like keywords that I could see that you connected.
Yeah, I think part of it is just that at that point I had started to sort of recognize my style and where I would really hit my stride with performing. And so I think I'd been performing for like maybe 3 years at that point, and I started realizing that when I start, a poem with the serious like metaphors and the just getting into the meat of it, it just doesn't work for me. I have it takes me a while to get comfortable on stage, and so I had realized that finding a way to sort of start jokey and funny and light, and then ease in and use that as an avenue to sort of like get to my substance, was just something that it let me get comfortable on the stage. It let me connect with my audience. It let me kind of shake off all of the discomfort of being so vulnerable. And so that's just something that has really kind of become my writing style of like, I've heard it described as like make them laugh, make them feel bad for laughing, where you just like start, with the jokes, and then you kind of ease that knife in. And so I've like read a ton of Goosebumps books. I was just, a big nerd, and like always, I just loved it, especially the choose your own adventure ones. And so it was sort of a like a body that I could draw from, and I knew I could make jokes about. And then also I thought that it would give me some good imagery to twist. And that was where I really like started having a lot of fun of, okay, so I know I want to talk about like this one Goosebumps book with
Yeah.
slide, like how does that fit in with what I'm trying to express about anxiety, about mental health? And so that, I think, was the most valuable part of the writing process, was just figuring out okay, here's this image that I've already set up. How do I put into words what that means inside of my body?
Wow. Okay. That's really cool. With with that poem, I do think that you are very like confessional in your poems, and they're like you were saying, it's you get nervous about that. Um, can you kind of speak more about that? Like, because I watched this other video and you were like talking about like about your mom, and you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna do this poem with my mom, and have your mom find out about it. How did you kind of push through that? Being so revealing with your poetry.
Yeah, I think I'm lucky in that regard. I think it took a little bit, but I think with my family in particular, they sort of saw me coming into my own this way and finding this thing that was so valuable for me. I went to a really, really, really conservative college, and I think that's a big part of what sort of like led me to poetry. And so I was not surrounded by people who were like very accepting of me, and not surrounded by a lot of sort of like creative energy.
Mm-hmm.
It was like very sort of get in line and repressive. And so finding this community where it was, encouraged to talk about your feelings and encouraged to form these really special relationships, I think knowing the value of that for me in that time of my life, I think, my family came around. And then as I started growing as a writer, I have had conversations with different members of my family where they said, yeah, like you touched the pulse of this thing inside of me that I've been trying to express for a long time. So as I kind of worked on my writing and worked on my truth telling, to be honest, because I think early, as I was writing, especially, as you're watching a lot of slam, you see people talking about like the worst things that have ever happened to them. And I think that's an instinct that a lot of early writers have, is to kind of reach for the most traumatic thing instead of necessarily the most true thing. And as I started kind of thinking about what are the quiet moments in my life and in my family that are important to talk about, and I found that we had a lot of common ground there. So it was good. But I will say, like, now, I mean, I don't write as much now. I'm in my last month of law school, and so I think it's hard. I think I'm much less comfortable now being that vulnerable. I think it came at a time in my life when I needed to be able to express myself that way, and it like I grew so much from it.
It's it's been a great gift. Like everything you've written, I remember like posting when that like Larry Nasser stuff. I posted one of your poems like tired of being of a woman today, because and a lot of people like resonated with that. That was really powerful. And one thing I love about your work is that you are super revealing and very powerful without being super inflammatory. And I think you and I both know what that means, because like when we see a lot of especially newcomers, they're super inflammatory, and then trying to kind of balance that out. How do you balance that out without like finding a balance, I guess?
Hmm. Well, I will say, I think like that is the sort of being revealing is something that it's just true to me in my real life. And I think a lot of it comes from like growing up with older brothers who just would tell all my secrets to everybody all the time. Like, did you know this really embarrassing thing? Just like my whole childhood and like all throughout my teen years, it'd be like, here's a secret. And so I kind of learned, I was like, well, I got to cut that off at the knees. And so I am just a person where like, I will immediately be like, do you want to know the four most embarrassing things about me? So
Yeah.
that no one else can come in later. It's a sort of offensive attack. And so I think I had realized just in my personal life that that can sometimes, like, it doesn't work for everybody, but that can build like a lot of intimacy with folks where you're just saying like, look, yep, like here are my embarrassing things, and I'm still willing to be open with you and all of that. And so I think that definitely translates to my poetry as well. But I think um, yeah, I think definitely internal openness works so much better than external openness, at least for me. Because when I see people, oftentimes where I get uncomfortable is seeing people on stage revealing intimate details that maybe aren't theirs to share. Maybe it's them and another person, or maybe it's getting into the sort of nitty gritty, flashy details of something that doesn't belong to them. And I think that can be very uncomfortable. But anytime you're sharing something that's true to you, there's a good chance that it's like true for a lot of folks. So I think just maybe like shining that light inside is a lot more effective, at least for me, than like trying to spotlight something else, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting for the yeah. Huh. Thank you. I think you gave a lot of great details and a lot of great tips. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but thank you. Um you just came out with this wonderful book. I just wanted to plug that as well. So okay, cool. Thank you. I
Thank
appreciate your
you
time.
so much.
And I will talk to you on the 14th.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Bye.
Thanks.